So today I want to read yet another of my favorite authors, and I'm just going to again extract a couple of small parts of a paper which is called Blackfoot Physics and European Minds. It's by David Peat, who's a physicist, and I think he died fairly recently, a few years ago. But anyway, he was working in what's called the Pari Center, Pari, and this paper can be found on their website. So he spent some time with the Native Americans, the Blackfoot, and he observed what they were doing, and he was very inspired to see a lot of parallels between their worldview and the worldview that has started to emerge during the 20th century with quantum physics and relativity. So let me read it, and then I'll probably talk about it either today or later. So, what is the nature of Blackfoot reality? Certainly, it is far wider than our own, yet firmly based within the natural world of vibrant, living things. Once our European world saw nature in a similar way, a vision still present in poets like Blake, Wordsworth, and Gerard Manley Hopkins, who perceive the immanence and inscape of the world. Nevertheless, our consciousness has narrowed to the extent that matter is separated from spirit, and we seek our reality in an imagined elsewhere of abstractions, Platonic realms, mathematical elegance, and physical laws. The Blackfoot know of no such fragmentation. Not only do they speak with rocks and trees, they are also able to converse, which remains invisible to us, a world of what could variously be called spirits or powers or simply energies. But these forces are not the occupants of a mystical or abstract domain. They remain an essential aspect of the natural material world. It's not so much that the Blackfoot live in an extended reality, but that our own Western vision has become excessively myopic. This wider reality embraces flux, movement, change, and transformation. The creator of the land, Napi, the old man, is also its trickster, one who is constantly changing form, traversing boundaries, and upsetting preconceptions. For example, what the West takes as the aberration of multiple personality becomes the acceptance that an individual is not a fixed thing, but fluid, a being whose multiplicity is reflected in the way a person's name keeps transforming during their life. How is one to maintain orientation in a universe in which everything is caught up in the river of transformation? How can anything be preserved from change? The answer lies in participation within the flux by means of acts of renewal. Renewal requires an act of sacrifice, and it is these sacrifices, these actions of participation, performed each morning when the sun rises, each year at the sun dance, which help to maintain the great circle of renewal. Thanks to these acts of renewal, time within the flux turns on its axis. Seasons follow seasons. Circling time is always the same, yet always different, always renewed. Acts of renewal reflect the compacts formed in ancient times, negotiated relationships between the ancestors and the energies or spirits or keepers of the land. No one believes that a pipe ceremony actually causes the sun to rise. Rather, by renewing their relationships to the dynamics of nature, the Blackfoot maintain a harmonious role within the cosmos. Within a balanced cosmos, the sun will rise and the seasons follow in their proper harmony. Personal sacrifice, responsibility, ceremonies, and acts of renewal therefore have nothing to do with the world of mechanical causality, but are more to do with a relationship to a living cosmos. Although it does not come from the Blackfoot, the story of the rainmaker well illustrates this point. A rainmaker was called to a region experiencing drought. He arrived and immediately went into the hut provided for him, only to emerge several days later as it began to rain. When he was asked how he had made the rain, he replied that he had not caused the rain to fall. Rather, when he arrived in the village, he discovered everything to be in disharmony. He therefore retired to his hut in order to bring himself back into balance. Once balance had been restored, then nature returned to harmony, and the rain fell as it naturally should. Carl Jung chose to term this synchronicity. He chose to term this synchronicity his acausal connecting principle. It was present earlier in the West in the form of alchemy, in which external material workings and internal transformations mirror each other. This constant movement toward balance and harmony within the flux is the essence of the Blackfoot world. Plants have the power to heal. For the Blackfoot, the nature of their action cannot be reduced simply to chemical substances or molecules. Healing involves a relationship to the entire plant, and this includes its power, energy, spirit, or in Goethe's terms, its archetype. When one hunts for a medicine plant, or for that matter for an animal, one does not pick the first or second one comes across, but always the third. A prayer is first offered that the plant will sacrifice itself, and after it has been picked, an offering is made to the earth. Returning home, the plant is treated in a respectful manner, for one is not only dealing with the particular, but the universal, the guardian of the plant, the archetype. In the action of healing with the plant, energy may be exchanged, but within such a metaphysics, whatever is taken must, in some way, be paid back. Let's see. Knowledge is not partitioned in a holistic world, and Blackfoot science is not confined simply to the material. It embraces society and good government. Its norm is balance and harmony. Society is not an artifact built by individuals with rights and freedoms. Rather, it is a process of renewal, a coherent whole out of which emerge persons with responsibilities and obligations. An individual exists in respect to his or her relationship with society and nature. Take as an example Blackfoot justice. What we would term a crime is, to many Indigenous people, a disruption of the harmonious working of their society. Rather than approaching this disorder in terms of adversarial trial, proof, guilt, and punishment, the circle of elders meet with the aggrieved party and the perpetrator. Discussion within this circle is not so much designed to establish the factuality of what has occurred, but rather it seeks a way of restoring balance. Thus, the perpetrator may be asked to suggest some action that would satisfy all parties. Finally, when everyone is again in a balanced relationship, the decision is made public. So there's so much in this paper, actually. So much I haven't read, but just so much. And so I want to talk about what we talked about before in the Western Project, when we talked about the Western Project. What has the West been doing, right? So here also is David Peat. He's comparing the thinking of the indigenous Native Americans, indigenous people, with the thinking of the West. So specifically, he calls it European thinking, although as he points out, it's all over the world right now. It's pretty much the dominant way of thinking right now. So I guess the Native Americans have always lived sort of, within the natural world, as part of the natural world, in balance and harmony with it. Whereas the fundamental thinking behind the Western approach is much more how to control nature, how to separate from and be above nature. And we don't consider ourselves part of nature so much, but we really emphasize the part of us that is above nature. But all of us can see that whereas indigenous communities lasted for thousands of years sometimes, right? Think of the Aboriginals in Australia, 30,000 years maybe, a stable way of life. But we can all see that the Western world is in a crisis. So I want to analyze more about primordial unity and see how maybe it could have helped us a lot more if we had decided to adopt some of the ways of the Native Americans and some of their thinking when, for instance, our ancestors came to this country. Okay, we'll talk more about that.